Hello Eorestians, welcome back to Remnants of a Realm. Last week we looked back at Western Thanalan, more specifically Camp Horizon, Footfalls, Nothica's Wells, Scorpion Crossing, as well as the original 1.0 Ifrit quest. In the past few episodes I may have used too broad of a brush when looking back at certain areas, like in the previous episodes where I mentioned covering Western Thanalan, for example, when it really was just the camps and the ethereal gates. We're going a little bit back to basics in this episode with more concentrated views on points of interest around a central camp, not region. Now before we move on, please be advised, we are about to enter the Black Shroud. Viewer discretion is advised. Turn off now if you can't handle it. Okay, here we go! Welcome back to the Black Shroud as it appeared in 1.0. We're in Central Shroud, right outside the main focus of this episode, Camp Bentbranch. This camp was located in the Bentbranch area and was the first camp you'd encounter on your way out of the safe and comforting embrace of Gridania to the dark, copy-pasty waffle-shaped maze of the Black Shroud. The camp was incredibly important to the region as it was where most of the region's initial leave quests were located. It was basically the region's starter camp, and of course provided players with a mender, merchant, and the Aetheryte. The Aetheryte was connected to 3 different ethereal gates covering most of Central Shroud, Humble Hearth to the west, Sorrel Haven to the southwest, and 5 Hangs to the southeast. Camp Bentbranch also had an ethereal gate connection to the Tamtara Deepcroft, which we covered in a previous episode. Click up here if you haven't watched that yet. Running through Central Shroud was the Fur Line and the Lumber Line. Bentbranch acted like a junction point where the Fur Line, which went north, became the Lumber Line going south. The Fur Line would go all the way to Kurthus, while the Lumber Line would go to Thanalan. In the previous episode I talked about how Thanalan's main theme changed with patch 1.18. That was slightly inaccurate actually, the theme did change, but not all over Thanalan. The new themes were implemented in the high-level zones to emphasize the sharp increase in difficulty and put you in a high-level mood. In the Black Shroud, the entire region would play this theme before patch 1.18. The theme was called Emerald Labyrinth. Sorrel Haven was one of the ethereal gates connecting to Bentbranch and was located to the far southwest of Bentbranch proper. The area was similar to that of Murmur Rills, in that it was actually wetlands. Murmur Rills and Sorrel Haven being the only 2 areas in the Shroud looking like this. The name of the area comes from how extensively the herb sorrel grows in the area, most likely due to the moisture in the ground. A point of interest in this area was Evershade. This location contained very little, I guess this tree, and yeah, that's more or less what it was in 1.0. An open area with some trees and bushes. This tree would gain more importance after the calamity, but we'll get to that. Let's move up north and take a look at Humble Hearth. Humble Hearth was located to the west of Camp Bentbranch, directly south of Gridania, and obviously served as both a teleport location as well as a leave questing area. Humble Hearth covered a very tiny area, but probably had the highest density of open clearings in the area. The area also contained several caves, one of which containing my favorite points of interest, Amber Scale Rock. We've already covered this in a previous episode, but gods, I recommend you go check that episode ASAP if you haven't watched it already. It's by far my favorite point of interest in the game, even to this date because of its unresolved storyline. I did forget to point out where Amber Scale Rock is located today in that episode though, so allow me to point it out. It's right here. Make sure to check it out. Another point of interest was Lifemen Stump. It was, well, what can I say? It's a tree stump. Okay, it's a giant tree stump. This stump was a special stump because the stump... Okay, I went off script and I couldn't stop saying stump for some reason. Anyway, the Lifemen Stump was a little out of the ordinary as it was decorated with these stones, forming a pattern. Gridanians would also travel to this stump and leave broken objects here for the Muggles to mend. The stump was featured in the Conjurer and White Mage quests as well as the Gridanian main scenario. The last ethereal gate was located to the southeast of Camp Bentbranch, 5 Hangs. This location was similar to Lycanweed as it consisted mostly of elevated ground compared to its surroundings, with several steep bridges crossing numerous rivers. The rivers all end up in the pond called the Mirror. Now, as you can see from this map, there is especially one location that should look familiar to you. That's right, that's Lavender Beds. In 1.0, Lavender Beds was located here and contained nothing of interest other than the name. As a quick side note, Lily Hills was actually located within 1.0 Gridania, which we will return to in a later episode. It was often rumored to be a planned housing area, which obviously never saw the light of day. Makes you wonder though, how would that housing system work? As the calamity struck the Black Shroud, Central Shroud saw extensive destruction in all directions. It would also see several major retcons. The camp's direct connection to Camp Emerald Moss was severed, the lumber line disappearing entirely. Bentbranch itself still exists in a Realm Reborn, but the camp is now called Bentbranch Meadows, and Bentbranch proper now covers a substantially larger area than it did in 1.0. Sorrel Haven has shifted location entirely further north, now being located northwest of the old Camp Bentbranch location. The calamity rent the ground and raised everything west of Bentbranch proper to a much higher elevation, causing Sorrel Haven to reach all the way up to Gridania's city gates. In the process, Evershade split off from Sorrel Haven, remaining at its old ground level and thus becoming part of Bentbranch. Evershade's tree now turns out to be none other than the Guardian tree, which plays a big role in the Conjurer, White Mage and main scenario quests in A Realm Reborn. Humble Hearth probably saw the most destruction in the calamity, as it seems to have been retconned entirely. There is no trace of it on the map, no lore reason given to its disappearance, and no traces of collapsed tunnels or entryways to the area. Though it is possible Humble Hearth is supposed to be located here or here, but you have to remember that this was such a minor location in 1.0, I suppose they just couldn't be bothered to put it in. 5 Hangs would see a similar fate. The Mirror is still in Central Shroud, but the landmass that once used to be the 5 Hangs seems to be gone for the most part. However, there is still hope for good old 5 Hangs, cause the Lavender Beds still exist, and to access this location you need to travel by boat, which gives credence to my theory that only the westernmost part of the 5 Hangs collapsed as the rivers overflowed and the land went all crazy, leaving Lavender Beds with no land connection. This still doesn't quite explain how that is possible via Gridania though. It works if you don't think about it too much, okay? Okay, oh, and Lifemen Stump still exists, but it's been moved out of the lumber line and retconned to the northeast of the old Bentbranch location, which again was retconned into Greentear, a location that didn't exist in 1.0. Retcons for days! Anyways, that was our locations for this episode. Now let's take a look at a feature that made a lot of Final Fantasy XI players feel at home in 1.0. Notorious Monsters. This is a feature I've mentioned several times, but never actually explained to non-1.0 players. The term Notorious Monster, or simply NM, was even used in the early A Realm Reborn days. But what exactly was this mysterious system? Simply put, Notorious Monsters served as open-world bosses that would spawn at random. A similar system was already in place in Final Fantasy XI, tested and proven to be a huge success there. The idea was, surprise, to move this system over to 14. Monsters would spawn at random all over the world. Some would have spawn conditions, others would have timers. Notorious Monsters could also be found in certain dungeons, and would more often than not have spawn conditions, like killing X amount of enemies in a certain room, or the like. NMs were often categorized based on their spawn conditions and difficulty. The lowest rank of NMs was the storyline NMs, which only appeared for you and your party in quest-related battles. Yes, even Ifrit was considered an NM. The open world NMs was the main category of NMs, and the spawn rate was low. NMs would often appear as normal mobs in the area, only their name being the key thing that would separate them from the crowd. Notorious monsters that were especially rare or difficult was often referred to as highly notorious monsters and would often yield much greater rewards when killed compared to the more common open world NMs. There were also faction-specific NMs that would only appear in faction leave quests. These would often yield great rewards as well and was highly sought after. I explained faction leave quests in a previous episode, by the way. As Tanaka left the team, the NM system was initially somewhat ignored as the dev team prioritized making the game, stable and playable first. Not until patch 1.17 did the NM system get some love, introducing lesser open world Notorious Monsters. Doesn't that just roll off your tongue? These NMs would appear all over the world just like their open world siblings, but they would be much weaker and with a 2 to 5 minute spawn timer. The gear dropping from these monsters were not as good as those dropping from the regular open world NMs, but they did give lower level and mid-core casual players a chance to obtain some sweet loot as well. This particular change to the NM system was received with mixed feelings from the Final Fantasy XIV community, as they felt the NM system didn't need more easy pop NMs, but more highly notorious ones. At the end of 1.0's life, the game had received 46 Notorious Monsters. As the game transitioned over into a Realm Reborn, Notorious Monsters woke up to a new life, most of them now appearing as bosses in the new Fate system. This is why the term NM remained in the everyday speech of 1.0 players for a very long time. And I mean, they're not wrong, those are the NMs that once roamed Eorzea, but they're no longer part of the NM system. With the introduction of hunts in A Realm Reborn, the spirit of NMs returned to Eorzea. Although not explicitly being referred to as NMs today, that is more or less what they are in 1.0 terms today. B ranks can be classified as a mix between the lesser open world and faction NMs. A ranks are the open world Notorious Monsters, and S ranks are the open world highly notorious monsters. And so we're at the end of this week's episode of Remnants of a Realm. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this slight revamp of the show. If you did, remember to leave a like, and if you're new here, I'd be very very if you subscribed. Let me know in the comments what you think about the stuff I've covered today, and I'll see you all next week. Take care, Eorzeans, and may you ever walk in the light of the crystal.